My name is Chris Epting. I'm an author and journalist. I have the distinct pleasure of hosting this conversation with Dave Mason, legendary Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, on the day that Alone Together, again, the 50th anniversary recreation of his classic album, is out officially today. Dave, congratulations. I know a lot went into this. There she is. There is an actual sample of not a sample, that is the actual CD that is just out today, physical copies. Wow. Dave, before we get into it, why don't you describe that bizarro pattern on the CD?
Choose the Christmas stockings. Come on.
But Dave, what you did with the CD, you've recreated the swirl vinyl from 1970. I mean, talk about detail. Was that your idea originally to do the colored vinyl?
Well, I was supposed to. The original cover has a sun coming up here. So the original idea was to come out like a sunburst, kind of like a Stratocaster sunburst.
Well, you created again.
No way to control the colors in the press, so they all every single one of them came out uniquely different.
Well, I know that pretty soon you're going to have some vinyl created for this album release. We've got a bunch of questions today from fans. We've got a very special guest coming up in a few minutes. And before that, though, again, your decision, Dave, I can't think of another artist that took not just their most classic album, but one of the most classic rock and roll albums of all time, and recreated it with a new band, a new spirit. What was the thinking behind it? Why would you undertake this and recreate an album as brilliant as Alone Together?
This was just basically, I mean, I didn't start this to do a CD at all. Sad and Deep as You I redid that. It could be nearly 15 years ago at a live show. I did it at XM Radio for Lee Abrams down in Washington facility. So that was from there. And then I started screwing around with thinking about my songs and doing different versions, how they would translate. Mm-hmm. So I started working on a version of, which is a new idea. It's something that's not true to the original arrangements, is World in Changes. Mm-hmm. And I came up with a version that was just, it's more in a reggae feel, believe it or not. But it's such a cool, it came out so cool that I thought, this is really great. So it was a standalone piece. And then along with that, of course, the loss of the original masters in the Universal Fire, right? Which, of course, no doubt they've got digital copies of it, but the original masters are gone. So it kind of spurred me on a little bit more to think about, well, actually 50 years is coming up in 2 or 3 years. So then the rest of the album, basically, we cut on the road about 3 years ago, one afternoon in New Jersey, in the studio. So the tracks are basically live, except when I'm redoing the vocals. And that's when then I sort of started thinking about compiling it as shoot, why not? I mean, the songs still stand up.
They absolutely do. Your voice does too. I have a question here from Gary, who asked you, Dave, over the years, your voice sounds as strong as ever. There's so many artists that lose their vocals. How do you keep yours so strong?
It's a great question, Chris.
That's Gary, not me. Tell Gary.
Oh, it's a great question, Gary. When you find the answer, let me know.
But he's right. You told me yourself that you felt that you're happier with these vocals now than you were on the original record 50 years ago.
I mean, essentially, I'm a guy who taught himself to play guitar because that's all I really gave a damn about was guitar. Okay? And singing was something that you had to start doing in order to get some gigs at a local pub or a club. So you had to learn the latest hits and stuff. So I sort of, teach myself, okay, I sing, even though I was in school choirs and stuff. But the years have added more, it has a little more timbre, has a little more, it's not an instrument that it's easier for me on guitar than it is vocally. So, but the years have given it a little bit more richness and, wear and tear and life, there's a little more life in it. So it's, I can still get up there quite a bit. I can't get way up there anymore. And my falsetto is certainly not like it was when I was 19 or 20. But as long as I keep doing it, I guess I'll get up there and keep singing and playing.
Talking with Dave Mason today, his amazing recreation of his classic album Alone Together. It's out now, called Alone Together Again. You can order it at davemasonmusic.com. We've got a special guest coming up in a couple minutes. I'll be pulling a couple of names here from folks who asked questions. You'll be getting kind of a prize pack later on. Lots of stuff happening here, Mr. Mason. John has a question here. John B. You tell the story of Stephen Stills showing you some guitar tunings that influenced Only You Know and I Know. My questions are, on collaborations during the early 70s, did you get to play with Crosby, Stills and Nash when they were forming at any point back then? And I know you kind of have. There was one moment up in Big Sur where you did kind of have an experience with them, right?
The big, was it the Big Sur? Big Sur? Is that what it was called?
Yeah. Sur,
yes.
Big Sur Music Festival.
Yeah, no, I sat in them and did Only You Know and I Know, and I think World in Changes.
Right. Acoustic versions.
No, they had the whole band going on. We might have just done them acoustically. I don't quite remember, but it was their first time that they played together, live. Also,
so Stephen, you guys, people don't realize you were kind of part of the Laurel Canyon scene. You were hanging out at Cass Elliott's house. You were there as CSNN kind of formed. So you were part of that whole thing right after you came over here from London. And you got to witness firsthand that genesis, and then Stephen helped you with some tunings. And you would play together. Graham sang on a couple of your records. I think you played on his. So you were tied in with those guys pretty well for a while, weren't you?
Yeah, I knew Graham from back in England.
Right.
So, yeah.
Duncan wanted to know, what was the easiest, quickest song that you ever wrote? I know what I'm thinking. Which song?
Every Woman.
Every Woman. And that took, how long did that take to write? One of your most classic ballads. I would guess it took a long time, but that's not true.
An hour, a couple hours.
Man, by the way.
It's just that one. The rest I kind of labor over.
Do you typically labor over songs? Is that more the process for you?
It took me about 2 years to finish those 8 songs on Alone Together. I'm not very prolific. I'm just, if I really knew what was going on, I'd have written a number of Feeling All Rights and Only You Know and I Knows.
Well, it's interesting when you recorded Alone Together. You're in your early 20s. You're a young guy. You had already been a founding member of Traffic. You had already written Feeling All Right. You had a number of fairly substantial musical accomplishments under your belt, and then you deliver this album that gets great reviews and becomes Blue Thumb Records' biggest seller of all time. It's a hell of a debut record. But another question here, Dave. Babette wanted to know, what is the best concert you've ever seen, not as a participant, but as a fan or just a listener?
Gosh, the first 2 things that come to mind was a flamenco player, Manitas de Plata, live at the Albert Hall when I was back in Traffic. And I think and the other one that comes to mind immediately is Elton John, who, when he first came over, he played the Troubadour.
Right.
And when you played the Troubadour for Doug Weston, you made a commitment that you'd make 2 or 3 more appearances. It was part of the contract in LA. And so this was like, he was huge, but he came back and did this show at the Troubadour with just him and that percussion player, the English guy, I forget his name.
Ray Cooper?
Yes, Ray Cooper. Him and Ray Cooper. That's it. That's all was on stage. It was just awesome.
Good shows.
Yeah.
By the way, I want to let everyone who's tuning in right now, just for you as being part of this conversation, if you order Alone Together Again by midnight tonight at DaveMasonMusic.com, your copy will be signed personally by Mr. Dave Mason, which makes this collectible even more rare and treasured and prized. Thanks for doing that, Dave. I think people will really enjoy that. It's actually the first 50 who do that before midnight can get their copies signed. Richard has a question here, Dave. Having seen you play both electric and acoustic concerts, do you have a preference to one or the other?
Electric.
Yeah. You say that without even, you didn't have to even think about that too much, huh?
No.
One other question here about Alone Together. Wendy wants to know, did you ever reconcile with the person referred to in Shouldn't Have Took More Than You Gave? Do you remember who it was about?
It's not about anybody.
Oh, it's not. So that's just something you wrote about in the abstract.
I know. Yeah, it's not really about anybody.
All right, well, that album.
It might have just come out of situations.
Right.
But not specifically about anybody.
Talking about Alone Together, we go back 50 years, 1970. You had a lot of amazing people playing that record. Leon Russell being among them. Your producer, Tom LaPuma, brought in all kinds of great players. You had just finished a tour with Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, opening for Blind Faith. And so you had a deep musical kinship with them. That's why I want to bring in our guest right now. We have a really special guest today. You've known her since back then. You've been friends, and she's rock and roll royalty herself. I mean, Bonnie Bramlett, aside from Delaney and Bonnie, has toured with Stephen Stills, the Allman Brothers. Bonnie, are you with us in here right now?
I am. Hi.
Thanks for being here as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Alone Together with Dave's new amazing recreation, Alone Together Again. What do you remember? I mean, 1970, it's a long time ago, but that was an important time for you musically as well. You and Dave had just done this amazing tour with Blind Faith, and then you get together in the studio to work on his album. One of Dave's songs, Only You Know and I Know, becomes a hit for you and Delaney. I mean, that was interesting. Do you remember how you came to record that song, or just what stuck out to you about it?
I exactly don't, because I know that Delaney and Dave and George were up at Alan Pariser's house. I had a baby. I was home with the kids. So that came from that meeting, because he came back with, where did you hear this song? So I remember that. And I remember first meeting Dave. You're so cute. Because you were all dressed up, and you had your cane. Do you remember it had this pinstripe suit on, 3 pieces with the vest, the whole 9 yards? I just went, oh my God, look at him. You guys were so cool. See, I didn't know anybody like in rock and roll. Delaney knew everybody, but I didn't know anybody because I was a blues man, Well,
I got it. I kind of got introduced them like way early on a previous Graham Parsons. And probably the first time I saw them would have been for sure at the Palomino.
Yeah.
Delaney and Bonnie.
Yeah, where I first saw Delaney and Bonnie, and that's back when, and the band, and it was, live, it was just like, oh my God, it was just, as I said, I told you, Chris, while we were doing the book, I'd already, previous to all this, when I'd gone back on a trip to England, told Chris Blackwell about Delaney and Bonnie and said, you really need to sign this band because they're just awesome.
And I wish you would have.
And at the time, that first time, great little drummer named Jimmy Karstein.
Yeah, sweet Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy Karstein, and what a great band live. It was just, and then we finished up getting managed by the same people, i.e. Alan Pariser and stuff. And then, of course, I went out and joined playing guitar with them, which for me was just, the reason I come to America in the first place was to get closer to the source.
Amen. Yeah.
Right. So, and I'm I'm thrown right into it, you know. Bunch of Tulsa
Dave,
guys.
at that point, when you record Alone together, Delaney plays on the album. A lot of the same players from that band came in, so it really became like your extended musical family, having Bonnie there, having Delaney there, having other players as well. I mean, for people who don't know or remember, I mean, Delaney and Bonnie, this is a band that George Harrison wanted to be a part of. Eric Clapton was a part of it. This is a real magnet for a lot of your British players who came over and wanted to play with the real deal, right, Dave?
Well, for sure. I mean, you know, they were just, you know, like I say you know, about everything about British musicians, other than real bluegrass, which has its roots in Europe. Everything else has its roots here in America. R&B, jazz, gospel, country, da-da. You name it. If it wasn't for all the blues players, there'd be no Eric Clapton. There'd be no me. We'd be playing something else. I don't know why.
And you know what? It took you guys to make us appreciate. Well, I'm not going to say not me because I'm a blues guy. The band to appreciate that.
You know, it took us guys to turn you all back on to.
That's right. That is right. And another thing is we sat in. We asked you to play with us.
Yes.
We didn't ask each other to play in their band in those days. I don't know what was wrong with them because they did it in St. Louis.
Right.
If a musician came in, it was rude not to ask them did they want to play.
That's right.
Hey, by the way, Dave, I want to mention that for folks who look in comments right now, you can pre-save the album on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever platform you use. The digital release comes out in a couple of weeks, and if you go and pre-save the album, that'll make you automatically eligible for a video greeting from Dave Mason himself. Bonnie, maybe you'll do one of those too. Maybe we'll rope you in. But in the meantime, so getting back to Alone Together, you know, I know that the sessions didn't go on that long. I mean, back then you would go in, you would do your record and kind of move on. But the songs definitely live on. Dave, you also eventually played on some Delaney and Bonnie studio work. Talk about the experience that you had when Delaney called you up about a solo on one of their records that he wanted replaced, right?
Well, there was a song that they put out as a single called "Coming Home."
Right.
And I had already been on the track with a slide part that's in there. Sort of, it's a repetitive slide part that's just in the track, which has a whole other little story about that. But I also. I was sitting, I think, at Alan Parise's when Delaney had called and said, "Hey, man, can you come on down the studio? Eric put a solo on this thing, but I don't like it. Can you come down and put a solo?"
Eric Clapton.
Right. And I'm like, "You sure, man?" He said, No, come on. So I finished playing the solo in it, too. But the thing about the slide part is that we went to Europe with Delaney and Bonnie, and we did a show at Croydon, Fairfield Hall. And at that show, Eric came down, and George was with him.
George Harrison.
Right. And so, of course, it was like, well, Eric, you know, you're going to come up and sit in, of course, because he's already, you know, he knows the band, he knows the players. And then it's like, well, George, you know, come on, sit in with us. And I read this in an article that he did an interview, which was I was surprised the hell out of me. So at that point, I said, well, you know what? Here, can you think you can do this? And I said, there's a slide part. It's real simple. You just got to keep repeating it. Keep doing this. So he kind of worked on it a little bit, and he got it down. And he said, so I learned that part. He said, and that's actually what got me into starting to play that whole slide guitar style that, of course, he had down pat. But
wow.
But yes, it's interesting.
So were it not for that Delaney and Bonnie show, you wouldn't have gotten to teach George Harrison the slide part that we're going on.
Not have gotten into.
You'd have done it some other way. It was meant to be.
It was meant to be. It was meant to be.
Hey, Dave, I have a question here from Derek. Good question. He says, we've all grown older and wiser in the last 50 years. What has time added to your perspective in revisiting the amazing music of your debut solo album, Alone Together?
I'm sorry, what do I think?
Like, what have you learned in the 50 years approaching it? How has time changed you, and how would that have affected the approach to the record?
I mean, it doesn't affect my approach to the record at all. I've always approached recordings pretty much the same way. Probably a lot of it was when I was younger. I was going more for perfection in the studio when I should have just been going for the feel. So it's gone more into that as I get older. It's like I said, like Alone Together would be interesting. That band, the group of people, like if we'd have had that group and we'd gone on the road for a month before cutting those songs on Alone Together, it would have had just a little, just that something little extra in there. So, which is part of what's on this Alone Together again, because it's my road band. And I've been playing some of these songs for 50 years. So, but doing it really hasn't changed.
But like you said, though, there is something about going for feel versus perfection. And I think when you listen to the new version of the record, the new Alone Together Again, it definitely feels like what you just said. It's less about perfection. It feels, the band obviously is comfortable with each other, but it does feel a little bit looser, perhaps, than the original did. So you would have achieved that. And your singing does seem stronger. I mean, your singing
the other way around. I think it sounds tighter than the original.
Right. I don't mean
feel
looser, but the feel is there. Maybe it's not as precise. I don't know, but I think the quality of your voice 50 years on, that's what blows people away, because your voice on the new record is remarkable. I mean, it really does feel seasoned and earthier and very present. And I think that's what gets a lot of people's attention. When both of you toured, that tour that you did in 1969 was one of the first really big rock and roll tours of that scale across America. You were playing new arenas like the Forum, Madison Square Garden, at a time where some of those arenas, no concerts had even happened there yet. You were sort of inventing the 20,000 seat indoor show with Delaney and Bonnie and Blind Faith. That had to be a crazy experience for both of you to be on the road like that, playing, going from playing clubs and small theaters all of a sudden now to a 20,000 seat hall. Do you remember that? Was it that different for you going out like that?
Bonnie, go ahead.
Not fair for me, because you had already, you guys had already made it. So I was thinking maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. To me, I didn't know any better. Right. It was another venue for me.
That's pretty much
better.
It's pretty much how I deal with it. It's another audience, bigger, but
the more the merrier. The louder the audience was, the better it felt on stage. That's all I knew. I just wanted to get out there. I didn't care where I was.
Right.
Who cares? See, let's rock.
I think the same thing for me and her is that with that kind of band, and if you were in, say it was the Palomino, and we were just there, and there was nobody in the club, we'd probably play just as hard. And place was full because we're doing it because we love doing it. We're playing for each other, and we're just getting off doing it.
And we had the after party because we went back to the hotel and played a whole other set together, didn't we? Didn't we? Yeah.
Hey, listen, the whole thing was an after party. It never stopped.
For those that don't know, Dave referenced, he and I have been working on his book throughout the last year. And in doing so, I spoke to Bonnie about a couple of stories about Dave around this era. On that tour, when you played Madison Square Garden, first night of the tour, Bonnie explained to me how when you guys went out there, the power blew before the first song. So, Dave, you and Delaney had to actually grab a pair of acoustic guitars. That's right. And until things got fired up again. Bonnie, you remember that, right?
I remember it like yesterday because I thought it was such a smooth, brilliant move. I was so proud because, they just grabbed their guitars and we just started, doing something acoustic. I forgot. I think it's probably Never Ending Song of Love for You or something like that,
Wow.
And we did that. I thought, wow, what a nice save. I even knew it back then, But now that I get to brag about it a little, you guys were way too cool. That's all I got to say. I mean, they didn't miss a beat. There was no power. There was no panic. They just reached to their guitars. There they were. We had good road crew. There they were. And we did the show. And when the power came back on, we rocked.
We professional.
Yeah, we knew what we was doing.
Dave, do you remember when the album, when Alone Together first came out, do you remember the critical reaction to it? Were you reading reviews at that point? Did you not care? Like, what was your, because it got great reviews. I mean,
yeah, I'm sure I was.
Yeah.
I mean, it got for a long time, it was like the classic album. I mean, God knows how many times it was on Desert Island Discs. It was so, yeah, it was great. I wasn't really ready for it. I mean, again, I'm not, even now I much prefer that we were younger and I was with Bonnie and we were out with a great band and doing our songs and I could be part of something. But anyway, so.
Well, I think
we really weren't full of ourselves back then. We are now. That we weren't then.
Well, I think the thing about the recreation of the new version, Alone Together Again, is I think for younger audiences that may not have heard the first album, first go around, what you show how it's really done. I mean, you're playing, your guitar playing, you give a clinic, as always. Yeah. The singing is right there. It's I think it's a real lesson to artists about how you.
I think. Yeah, I mean, I think young guys who love music would love this CD. Probably go, damn, who is that? That's good. Who is that? It's just how do you expose it to them? That's the problem these days. So.
We have a question from Greg B. Dave said to you, what was your take on doing the master guitar classes at the Art University in San Francisco? Do you like teaching? Do you like kind of speaking to a younger audience and doing that? Is it something you've enjoyed before, maybe you want to do more of?
I didn't do one, so I'm
not
exactly sure what he's talking about.
Well, it says master guitar classes at the Art University in San Francisco. Not you?
No.
Well, okay, throwing it out for a second.
I never thought I couldn't listen. I don't know what I'm doing. So to try and teach what I do to somebody else is,
okay.
And I don't have time for that. So it's, I got what was it? From the Art Institute, a PhD in English, I think, and for songwriting. But I've never given a guitar class.
Well, it's funny. People may not realize, you and I were talking earlier this week, there are clips out there available of you and Carlos Santana playing together at Cal Jam 2. There's clips of you available now, the Old Grey Whistle Test, where people can see not just you playing, but you and Jim Krager. When you would play together, your guitar playing was really inspirational and very unique. Like you say, you're self-taught. But it was you're just one of the greats that came out of that year, one of the great British players.
And taught so many other guitar players you don't even know you taught, because I know how I learned. I learned from the girl, you know what I mean? She didn't know she was teaching me, but she was. And you teach too, my friend.
Dave, have you had young players come to you and let you know that you were part of their sort of musical DNA and upbringing over the years? You must have heard. I would.
Players, no. I'm trying to think of what. Neil Sean came running up to me the first night on the Journey Doobie Brothers tour, going, "Oh man, Alone Together! God, I learned all those licks on that thing, man. That was so great." John Fogerty was, that thing you had on, only you know, I know how. So, I guess I don't know. I never really thought of, I don't really give it much thought, but I assume, maybe I don't know. I just think that I for me personally, it's like I'm technically not great on guitar, and I'm not Paganini. There's not 7 zillion notes going on in the thing. So I play within my capacity, and mostly a lot of it's to do with tone, and so yeah.
Well, listen, again, I think you're very modest about what you do, and we're here talking about Alone Together again, available now, DaveMasonMusic.com. If you order one right now, it'll be signed by Dave. That's got to be before midnight tonight. Dave, one more question here. Kim wanted to know when you first picked up a guitar. Do you remember? I know you had like a little ukulele when you were a kid at your sister's, but do you remember the first guitar that you got, and just what the story behind it was?
Oh, well, I just wanted I wanted a guitar. It's kind of the next thing after model airplanes and stuff. And everybody else was doing it. And it appealed to me, and it was something about it. And then there was the Shadows and Hank Marvin. Yeah, my first guitar was about $35. It was an electric guitar called a Mayfair.
Wow. So your first was an electric, your first guitar.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Let's start right out with this. No. And then the first thing I learned to play was Peter Gunn.
That was it. That was your first tune?
That was the first thing, of course.
Well, listen, you guys, I want to, first of all, before we head out here, I want to congratulate Sandra H. She's going to get a prize pack of Dave Mason merch. And Gary V is also. Those are our 2 winners today. But listen, I want to, Bonnie, first of all, thanks for hanging out. I mean, again, I think of you.
Thank you for asking me. And Dave, good luck on this. I can't wait to get mine. Yeah.
Well, no, we'll send you one, baby. Don't worry about it.
And Dave, when you get back, on behalf of everyone watching, I'm sure, Dave, when you get back on the road, you got to arrange something with Bonnie and get something going live, because there's you two have a lot more to do. The storyteller one is the way what we should do.
Absolutely.
Storyteller show. Well, Dave's book is going to be done soon. Again, we encourage you to go pre-save the album on Apple Music or Spotify right now, and go get your CD. If you want it signed by Dave, go to DaveMasonMusic.com and get Alone Together 50 years later. Dave, congratulations, man. Again, you've done what no other artist of your stature has done. You took arguably your most famous record, you reinvented it. It sounds better and fresher and stronger, and that's a testament to your resolve as an artist. And to people like you and Bonnie, you're the ones that keep the spirit of music. For those of us who grew up on your music, you keep it alive for this generation, the next generation, and ones after that as well. So I want to thank both of you. I can't believe I'm sitting here talking with both of you like this. It's an absolute thrill.
It's always been my pleasure.
All right. Thank you. Yes, thanks, everybody. Wear your masks out there. Okay, love you all.
Yes, wear the mask from now on. I wear mine.
Bonnie, I'll call you, honey, and we'll